Said 98% of cyber incidents can be prevented from implementing simple control measures.
We're talking a lot about really investing into your business to make it more resilient. However, like you mentioned just then, it's a big cost if you don't, but it also is a big cost if you do invest into these sort of measures. For a smaller organisation, it can be a bit daunting, not knowing where to start as well. So I have to ask you, is there anything in the market that can really help with this?
Yeah, so as I said before, I think one of the things we're trying to do with lots of organisations is get them to see cyber resilience as an investment as opposed to a cost. And it's not just about protecting yourself against the most common types of risks that are out there, but it's hopefully demonstrating to your customers that you take their data seriously. It's demonstrating perhaps to suppliers, or even if you're a part of supply chain, that you take cybersecurity seriously as well. And for me, it's also about, hopefully using that as an opportunity to allow your organization to grow, to innovate, to expand into new marketplaces. So we need to shift the debate from focusing very much on seeing cyber as a cost, as opposed to now seeing it more as a way of an investment that will help you grow your business and develop it. So I think that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say, and this is really important for me, is about, again, going back to this, getting the basics right. So just by doing those simple things can make a huge difference. I was up with Microsoft a few weeks ago, and one of their staff came up with this slide, which had a fantastic statistic on it, which said 98% of cyber incidents can be prevented from implementing simple control measures.
Wow.
98%. So, that's a significant percentage that can be overcome by just doing some of those basic things that I've mentioned earlier.
Yeah, and so you almost have to look at your results rather than the cost at hand and change that perception instead of just focusing all that, this is going to really cost my business. You're already going to have that cost if you don't make the investment. But you just might save yourself all the hassle and like I say, the reputation damage as an end result, as a positive. So we're speaking a lot about security in this, which goes hand in hand with data. And the insurance industry obviously has to manage data quite a lot. They have a lot of responsibility with data and protecting it. But how can they do this effectively?
Well, I'd start by saying I think the insurance industry is actually very good with data, and we often view it, certainly across policing and government, as a sector that handles data very well, and also understands what that data means and how that data can be used to illustrate certain trends or issues. So first of all, I'd say I think insurers are actually doing things very well. Perhaps one thing I wanted to focus on in relation to data, however, is to do with supply chains. And this is an interesting one. This is very much at the moment a topic of focus. The National Cybersecurity Centre issued some new guidance last month in relation to supply chain resilience. And we know that cyber criminals are now taking a much bigger interest in supply chains, simply because the larger organisations have understandably invested more heavily in their cyber resilience. And as a result of that, it's forcing those criminals to go to find weaker targets, often in that supply chain. So one of the things I would say in terms of managing data with insurers is about how you work with your supply chains. And I think we've moved on from where we were perhaps a few years ago, which is where there is either a small disregard for how suppliers manage data, to being one where it's more of a partnership. So actually, what I would like to see some of the larger organisations is, when they're working with smaller suppliers, actually spend some time with them, help them improve their cybersecurity, because ultimately, if they're less vulnerable, that's going to be less vulnerable to you as well. But as we know from recent government stats, sadly, the cyber breaches survey produced by the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, something like only 13% of businesses actually regularly review the security of their supply chain. So again, it's another example of making things really easy for cyber criminals. So supply chain resilience, working with your suppliers to look at how they manage data, particularly if they're transferring data to your organization, I would say is a really big focus at the moment, and something, if you haven't got a grip with, do it now.
Sure. Do you have any specific companies that you've noticed working with in the industry at all who have really benefited and you've seen such a change by implementing this kind of structure in?
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously many companies out there who do things like that, but one in particular, which I was really impressed with recently, I sat on a panel at an event in London with MasterCard. And they were talking about how globally, I mean, you imagine the number of suppliers that they have on an international basis, about how are they actually embrace and work with their supply chains. And in fact, being a larger organization, they're able to deploy resources to support the suppliers, ensure that they've got the relevant standards and security measures in place. And rather than seeing it as a review where they're striking suppliers off, they're encouraging a culture where suppliers actually feel comfortable saying, look, can you just help us out with this issue? Or we're not sure what we're meant to be doing here, or how do we improve our cyber? So it's a real proper partnership and a relationship. And clearly that has some really good implications in terms of reduced risk for the likes of MasterCard. So I think that's a really good example, and one that I certainly encourage others to follow.